Okay, time to start coding. I'll meet you over in Google Colab. Let's go colab.research.google.com. And while that loads up, I just want to show you the resource we're going to be using for this section. So right now, at the time of recording, there's two versions of this. A little bit confusing because while I'm writing this, Torchvision v0.13 is still in beta. So I'm kind of banking on the fact by the time this course comes out, it's out of beta, but I've set it up so that it'll work regardless. So we've got PyTorch Transfer Learning. We're going to be using the V2 notebook. Just again, by the time you watch this, the V2 might not exist. So just refer to PyTorch Transfer Learning as it is. So this notebook is a cloned version of that. So all this notebook is the same as this, but with updated code, and it requires the nightly versions of PyTorch and Torchvision be installed. So that's all you need to know. We're going to write code to fix all of this anyway. So I'm going to start a new notebook in Google Colab. Wonderful. I'm just going to zoom in here. And I'm going to call this 06 PyTorch Transfer Learning. And I'm going to just use the video tag here so that you know this video was created from the video. And let's make a little heading up here. 06 PyTorch Transfer Learning. And we go, what is transfer learning? Give us a little note. So transfer learning involves taking the parameters of what one model has learned on another data set and applying them to our own problem. A very powerful technique. And just some nomenclature. So pre-trained model, you might also hear these days, a lot of people are calling them foundation models. So I use pre-trained model quite often, but you can also hear foundation model. The term is, they're interchangeable. As I said, machine learning uses a lot of different terms for the same thing. So I want to make sure we're using GPU code here. So I just went to change runtime type. And now we're going to get set up to make sure that we're using, if we go to Torchvision, the documentation, we want to make sure right now, as the time of recording, version 0.12, we don't want to use that version. We want to use the latest and greatest version, specifically v0.13, which is going to, the latest version at the moment is 0.14, but we want 0.13 plus. So this has got some updated APIs that we want to use, specifically the multi-weight API. Support, I'll let you read this blog post if you want. What this is going to enable us to do is use multiple different models. When it says weights, pre-trained weights, they are patterns a model has learned on another data set. So Torchvision's new multi-weight support API allows us to use multiple of the same architectures with different weight setups. Now we're going to get hands-on with this later on, but this is why we want to use this latest and greatest version, because it had an upgrade to the last version. So the way we can check the PyTorch versions that we're using, import Torch, import Torchvision. So if you have, I'll just write down here, we're checking the versions of what we currently have. If you have Torchvision version 0.13 plus, you don't have to do the next step we're about to do. So want 0.12 plus, or sorry, 1.12 plus, and we want for this one, we want 0.13 plus. Let's see what versions we have. Yeah, there we go. So I currently don't have the version of Torchvision that I'm after, and I also don't have the version of Torch that I'm after. So we can go to PyTorch Getting Started. And if we wanted to upgrade, we can start locally and we can go preview nightly. So this is going to give you the latest and greatest versions of PyTorch. They are generally unstable. So the stable version is this, but also they get to a point where an unstable means they may have errors, but they also get to a point where the nightly versions are pretty darn good and they're basically about to be stable, which I think is the case with the versions we're after. So with that being said, I've got a block of code here. If you have, I'm going to copy this. So this is from V2. It might be in PyTorch Transfer Learning. So just keep that in mind. It might not be V2 by the time you watch this. But if these versions are already 1.12 plus and 0.13 plus, you don't need to run this next block of code, and you can skip the rest of this video and go to the next video. So I'm going to run this. What it's going to do is try to import Torch and Torchvision and assert that they're a different, or that they're a specific version number. And if they're not, they're going to install, we actually don't need Torch audio. They're going to install the upgraded versions of Torch and Torchvision from, or using the code here. We want pip, there we go. It's using very similar code to what's going on there. So I'm going to run this. It's going to fail the exception. So it's saying info, Torchvision versions not as required, installing the nightly versions. So I'm going to let this run and install the nightly versions of Torch and Torchvision. It may take about 4 to 5 minutes or so, depending on how fast the Colab internet connection is to pip. But I'm going to let this run and I'll be back once it's finished. Alrighty, it looks like it's worked. So if we go back through here, we've just got some downloads happening with all the new versions of Torch and Torchvision that we're after. It uninstalls the existing installations and then installs what we're after there. And so if we're using Google Colab and we've just installed some new packages, we have to restart the runtime. So let's restart the runtime. And then if we run both of these after this is finished restarting, we should have the nightly versions. Beautiful, there we go. It's called dev version there. And there's the date of when the dev version was created. And we've got Torch version 1.13 and 0.14. This is okay because we just want 1.12 plus for Torch, and we want 0.13 plus for Torchvision. And now if we run this, it should pass the assertions. Beautiful. So we've got Torch version and Torchvision version there. So just keep in mind, if you run this little block and you have the versions that are compatible with this notebook, you don't necessarily need to run this. But if you do come back to this notebook at a later time and you don't have these versions installed, you do have to run this block of code for the later versions of the API to work. So eventually Google Colab will have these versions by default, but just for now, we need to run something like this to install upgraded packages. So let's move on to the next video and we'll get even more set up. We'll import some of the code we've written in previous videos into this notebook. I'll see you there.